Assalamu alaikum. I'd like to ask everyone to please silence their devices. We are live. Please mindful of the cameras, please. Inshallah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkelu alayhi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Brothers and sisters, I will begin as we began most Qur'ans, Salat Jumah Qur'ans, and ask that we remember our brothers and sisters throughout this Jumah, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and they suffering, whether we know the cause of that suffering or not. And there's one cause that we are absolutely clear about, because of the high visibility and the constant looping of images of our brothers and sisters in Gaza and also in the West Bank. Those in the West Bank were forcibly removed from their homes as an absolute genocide taking place in occupied Gaza as well as in occupied West Bank. And the images now, we think that we've seen the worst. But the images of, because of those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala returns back to himself, we know their state. Alhamdulillah, they're shaheed. But for those who remain behind, the images that we see and what we hear reported by those on-the-ground journalists, most of them citizen journalists, that there have not been as many journalists reporting a war in the time frame that we have what's going on in Gaza today. There hasn't been that many journalists, just reporters, who are to be off limits. It hasn't been that many killed in any conflict in modern times. And what we are witnessing today, for those who remain, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows them to maintain their life. If it's for another half hour, another day, another part of the day, we see absolute starvation, a deliberate starvation of the people who remain alive after this horrible bombing and killing of men, women, and children by bombs, by drones, by missiles. An army, the fourth most equipped army on the face of the earth, attacking unarmed civilians, men, women, and children. So let us not allow ourselves to just get worn out by looking at these images and understanding that these are images that are a product of genocide. Let us continue to pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings an end to the suffering of the people as they are being bombarded and attacked. Brothers and sisters, lest we forget, let us not forget the Muslims of China. I was reminded of this just last night in a meeting, a community meeting. And the lady had said that she had just come back from China. And she brought back this very colorful, what she said, what is that thing you call on your head? I said, I call it a kufi. And she brought back this very colorful kufi. And she was talking about how beautiful it was, but she said, I can't believe that the Muslims of China are suffering in the way that they're suffering. It's one thing to hear about the suffering, it's another thing to be able to see it with your own eyes. It's out of the media. So don't forget to remember our brothers and sisters in China, our brothers and sisters, the Rohingya from Burma, from Myanmar. Let us pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect them. And then finally, let us pray for this nation. Pray for this country. Because the track that is on, and it's less than 250 years of existence, is a track. It's a path that leads to perhaps the end of a democratic nation. And we should never think and just take the words that are coming out of presidential candidates' mouth as just words. When you start talking about in this country, every Muslim should be concerned. Every Muslim should be concerned when major political parties and their candidates, one in particular, one party and one candidate in particular starts talking about this endorsing white Christian nationalism. This is not the format for me to get into that. But every Muslim should be concerned in the direction that this nation is going. Someone saying that if I'm elected, I'm not going to let a single another Muslim come into the country. A party saying that we're endorsing white Christian nationalism, meaning that this country was founded for white folks, and it's a Christian nation. And everybody else needs to get out of here a step to the side. Pray for America. Because we're living in a very difficult period that the du'as of the Muslim, the actions that we do on a day-to-day basis may be a saving grace that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may give more time for the citizens of this nation for us to correct our behavior. Brothers and sisters, we're only 17 days depending on the signing of the moon. We're only 17 days from the beginning of another month of Ramadan. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the believers at the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because of the emphasis that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself put on this month of Shaban, Aisha radiallahu anha had said about her beloved husband, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that there was not a single month without, except for the month of Ramadan, that I saw Prophet Muhammad ﷺ fast as many days as he was fasting. No other month of the year outside of the month of Ramadan did the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ fast more than this month that we're in right now. Brothers and sisters, many of us rightfully look at our lives today and we are begging Allah, oh Allah, let me make it to the month of Ramadan. Let me make it to this month of mercy. But we should also keep in mind, if we're following the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, if we're following his example, we're not going to just assume that we'll be here to fast during the month of Ramadan. What we're doing is like the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, follow that sunnah. If it means you're not fasting in an ordinate number of days, fast during the month of Ramadan. The month of Shaban. This is a month in which we're not practicing what we're going to do in Ramadan, but it's an awakening in our souls, awakening in our hearts and minds that what we must do is be in a constant state of total submission to the best that we can humanly do. Brothers and sisters, in Sahih narrations, we find that on one occasion that was reported in the Sahih Bukhari and the Sahih Muslim, that the angel Jibreel appeared to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ while the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was in a gathering of the brothers. And in this particular appearance, he appeared to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and those who were sitting around him in the form of a man. And the interesting part is related in the commentary about this hadith that that Jibreel alayhi salam assumed the facial features of a very well-known Sahaba of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So when he came, there was almost a double take. I thought this brother was sitting over here, but now I will see his clone. And so the angel Jibreel appearing in the form of the facial features of a known Sahaba began to question the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And as Jibreel alayhi salam questioned the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he wanted to know about Islam, he wanted to know about a few things. And he asked the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to tell me what is Islam. Tell me what is the highest expression of a believer's faith. What is it that we can do as Muslims, as believers? How is it that we can express in our day-to-day behavior this closeness and submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ answered in very simple terms. And he made it clear that all of the other things that we do to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there's one singular thing, one thing that you and I can do on a daily basis. And that is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if we can see him. And knowing that we are incapable of seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees your every action, understands and sees and hears everything that you do. And so if you and I are to achieve this ihsan, if we are to achieve any righteousness in this world, that it will come as the Prophet Muhammad gave this response to the question from Angel Jibreel, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see him. But know that you won't see him, but know that he sees you and knows everything that you're doing. You know, it's a very important, very simple message. When we talk about this month of Ramadan, when we talk about even fasting during the month of Shaban, but particularly in Ramadan, that there will be some of us, and I'm not talking about in this Salat, I'm talking about there will be some Muslims who will gather with other Muslims for iftar. There will be some who doing around the course during the fasting hours will act, pretend as if they're fasting. But this is just a useless kind of charade. It's just useless to pretend that we are worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He commands, that we're fasting during the daylight hours of Ramadan, and we're not. It's more genuine for us to just say, for this reason or that, I'm not fasting. I'm unable physically to do it. But know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees and hears and knows everything that we attempt to do in this world. And the best thing that we can do is this righteous behavior. And one of the doors to the practice of righteous behavior is simply to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if He sees us. And if we can't, and we know we can't achieve that in this world, then we should worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the knowledge that He sees and He hears and He knows everything that we do. Then I think that we're doing the personality of the personality of as well. Brothers and sisters, when we look into the life of the Prophet Muhammad, who of course is the best example for all human beings to follow. When we look at that example, and we see that this is a perfected way of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when we look into this garden protected sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad and we see and we read about and we listen about the stories of those who were non-prophets, those who were just like us, receiving no revelation. And we see how that generation, particularly this generation of believers, with and seeing and being with the Prophet Muhammad when we see the behavior that they were able to exhibit as non-prophets, we have, and I say literally, no excuse. We have no excuse to be in doubt about what it is we should do to practice this Deen of Allah. There's no excuse. If, in fact, we can have a hard time maybe trying to understand how a man, a prophet, a messenger like the Prophet Muhammad could withstand so much just for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah gives us this bonus of Sahaba and Tabi'een. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the examples of just non-prophets like you and I, that we can look at them. We can look at an Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. we can look at the Umar ibn al-Khattab. And the Prophet Muhammad was even reported to have said that if there were to be a prophet after me, it would be Abu Bakr. And if there were a prophet after Abu Bakr, it would be Umar ibn al-Khattab. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave these Sahaba, all of them, special, certain qualities about them. That whether or not we are gifted in one area or another, this deen and the examples in front of us are so plentiful that you and I know that we're following the example of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but we can also look at how those Sahaba, how those Tabi'een, how they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not give as an excuse that I can't do this thing or another because that was the prophet and I'm not a prophet. Brothers and sisters, worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if we see him, but knowing that we can't do that, but worshiping him in a way that we are ever conscious that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of those things that we may do. That this is a simple formula for you and I to self-check, for us to conduct ourselves in a way that's pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether we're in the masjid or not, whether we are around the eyes of other Muslims or not. And I want to end on this particular note. And that is that when you and I think that we're doing something, that we're hiding it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but more importantly, we're hiding it from our brothers and sisters. If that's the beginning of how nifaq, how hypocrisy can grow in our hearts. That if we think it's just a matter of not letting another Muslim see us doing wrong, then this is the beginning. How hypocrisy, how nifaq will begin to just germinate, just to grow inside of us. And so I started to keep repeating the same point. But a very important formula for us to seek righteousness in our behavior, to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands, is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if we see him. And if we know that we can't, as we know that we can't, then we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the understanding that we know that he sees and hears everything that we do. Do it. Oh Allah, give us an understanding of this thing that's good for us in this world. And oh Allah, be pleased with our efforts during this month of Shaban, and if you allow us to live through the month of Ramadan, be pleased and accept our efforts. And oh Allah, make not this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad an object of test of disbelief. Brothers and sisters, here, make a couple quick announcements.